Hey everyone. So today, we are going to unpack the characters of what is probably Shakespeare's most famous tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. Because really, if you want to understand how this whole thing ends in such a devastating way, you've got to understand the people involved, what makes them tick, the world they live in, and the choices they make.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? Who is actually to blame for this tragedy? Was it all just fate, written in the stars, like the prologue says? Or was it just a whole series of terrible choices made by real people? Let's dive in and see what the characters themselves can tell us.
All right, first up, Verona's vicious feud. See, before we can even talk about Romeo and Juliet, we have to get a handle on the world they were born into. Their story doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's set in this city, Verona, that's been absolutely poisoned by this long, violent family feud. So at the heart of this whole mess are two major families, the Montagues and the Capulets. And here's the thing. We never actually learn why they hate each other. Shakespeare calls it an ancient grudge. And that's kind of the point. It's this senseless, deep-seated hatred that they've all just inherited, and it's thrown the entire city into chaos.
And believe me, this isn't just a little disagreement. The fighting in the streets has gotten so bad that the ruler of Verona, Prince Aeschylus, has to lay down the law. He basically says, that's it. The next person who starts a brawl in public will be put to death. So think about that. The stakes are literally life and death before our main characters even show up on stage.
Next, we meet the star-crossed lovers, and right into this pressure cooker of a city walk our two heroes. Their love story is basically the spark that's going to light the fuse and turn all this simmering tension into a full-blown inferno.
Okay, so first there's Romeo Montague. He is all passion, all emotion. When we first meet him, he is being super dramatic, moping around because he's heartbroken over a girl named Rosalind who wants nothing to do with him. Then you've got Juliet Capulet, and get this, she's not even 14 years old. She's pretty much the perfect, obedient daughter, and her parents are already busy planning who she's going to marry. So at this point, they're both just playing the parts their families expect them to play.
You know, it's interesting. Romeo is a classic example of what we call a tragic hero. A tragic hero always has a fatal flaw. The Greeks called it hamartia, that ultimately leads to their downfall. And for Romeo, it's his impulsiveness, hands down. He acts first and thinks later. In a world that's already soaked in sudden violence and passion, that tendency to just react based on pure emotion, well, it's not just a quirk, it's a recipe for disaster.
And don't think for a second that Juliet isn't just as intense. That famous line from the balcony scene, you know the one, it's more than just romantic, it's actually pretty radical for the time. She's basically saying, why do you have to be a Montague? Just forget your family, forget your name, and I'll forget mine. I mean, think about that. She is ready to throw away her entire identity for a guy she met like a few hours ago. That shows you just how all in she is.
All right, our next section, friends, foes, and friars. Because, of course, Romeo and Juliet aren't in this alone. They are surrounded by this whole network of people, friends, enemies, mentors, and every single one of them has a role to play in pushing and pulling our lovers toward their destiny. So, who's in this circle? Well, you've got Mercutio, Romeo's hilarious but cynical best friend. On the other side, there's Tybalt, Juliet's cousin, who is basically pure distilled hatred for all things Montague. Then you have the adults who are trying to help. Kind of. There's Friar Lawrence, who's got this big idea about peace, and the nurse, who's like a second mother to Juliet and just wants her to be happy. Every one of them is absolutely critical to how this story unfolds.
Let's zoom in on Mercutio for a second. This guy is the life of the party. He's so witty, so sharp-tongued, and he is constantly giving Romeo a hard time for being such a hopeless romantic. You could call him a realist or maybe just a total cynic. He's the perfect foil, really, to Romeo's dreamy, head-in-the-clouds view of love.
And then you have the complete polar opposite, Tybalt. If Mercutio is all wit, Tybalt is all rage. The second he even hears Romeo's voice at the Capulet party, his first instinct is, get me my sword. He doesn't need a reason to fight. The fact that Romeo is a Montague is reason enough. He is, and this is the best way to put it, the feud made flesh. Just pure aggression and hate.
Okay, now for the two adults who are supposedly helping. You've got Friar Lawrence, who has this grand, noble idea. He agrees to marry Romeo and Juliet in secret because he thinks, hey, maybe this will finally end the feud. Then there's the nurse, who's been more of a mom to Juliet than her actual mother. She helps simply because she adores Juliet and wants her to be happy. The problem? Both of them are well-meaning, for sure, but their plans are, let's just say, deeply flawed, and they end up making things so much worse. This brings us to the point of no return. Everything we've been talking about, all these characters, all this tension, it all explodes in one single catastrophic scene. This is the exact moment the play pivots from a risky romance into an absolute unstoppable tragedy.
Okay, so let's walk through this fatal chain reaction, because it happens fast. Tybalt, who is still fuming about Romeo crashing the party, challenges him to a duel, but Romeo refuses to fight. He can't, right? He's secretly married to Juliet, which makes Tybalt his cousin-in-law now. Mercio has no idea what's going on. He just sees his friend backing down, and to him that's dishonorable. So he steps in to fight Tybalt, and then Tybalt kills Mercutio. In that split second, all of Romeo's good intentions vanish. He's just pure rage and grief, and he attacks and kills Tybalt. The cycle of revenge just got another victim.
And the consequence for this act of revenge? Romeo is banished. The prince is merciful, he doesn't execute him, but he exiles him from Verona forever. And this is a huge blow. It physically separates the brand new husband and wife and turns their secret marriage from something difficult into something that feels, well, completely impossible.
And the fallout just keeps coming. Lord Capulet sees his daughter is an absolute wreck, but he gets it completely wrong. He assumes she's heartbroken over her cousin Tybalt, so in his mind, he comes up with a great way to cheer her up. She's going to marry Count Paris, and not just someday, like right now, immediately. When she dares to refuse, he just loses it. He turns into a complete tyrant, threatening to throw her out on the street. Juliet is now trapped in an absolutely impossible situation.
And that leads us to the final act, a web of tragedy. Juliet is cornered, she's desperate, and she runs to the only person she has left to trust, Friar Lawrence. His solution? A super risky last-ditch plan that, well, it's what spins the final tragic web of the entire story. So here is the friar's plan, and it is a wild one. Step 1. Juliet will drink a sleeping potion that makes her look dead for 42 hours. Step 2. The friar will send a messenger with a letter to Romeo explaining the whole fake death thing. Step 3. Romeo will sneak back, get her from the family tomb right as she's waking up, and Step 4. They run away together and live happily ever after in exile. Simple, right? What could possibly go wrong?
Well, here's what goes wrong. The friar's messenger gets stuck in quarantine because of a plague outbreak. It's just a moment of pure, horrible, rotten luck. Or maybe you'd call it fate. Either way, the single most important letter in the entire play never makes it to Romeo, so he never finds out it's a trick. All he hears is the one piece of news he can't handle. Juliet is dead.
And that one piece of misinformation triggers the final, heartbreaking sequence of events. Romeo, completely destroyed by grief, buys a vial of poison and races back to Verona. When he gets to the tomb, he runs into Paris, who's there mourning. They fight and Romeo kills him. Then he sees Juliet, believes she's really gone, and drinks the poison. Just moments later, Juliet starts to wake up. She sees Romeo lying dead beside her, and with nothing left to live for, she takes his dagger and ends her own life. It is the perfect storm of bad information, terrible timing, and, once again, impulsive action.
So when you tally it all up, the human cost of this family feud is just staggering. We're not just talking about Romeo and Juliet. You've also got Mercutio, who died for his friend's honor, Tybalt, who died for revenge, Paris, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then there's Lady Montague. She dies off stage from pure grief over her son's banishment. That's 6 people, 6 deaths that can all be traced back to that one ancient grudge.
And here is the final, bitter irony of the whole story. It's only after all of this, standing over the bodies of their own children, that the Capulets and the Montagues finally agree to make peace. The very peace that Friar Lawrence was hoping a marriage could create ends up being bought with the lives of the very children they were supposed to love and protect. So, that brings us right back to where we started. Was it all just fate? Were Romeo and Juliet simply doomed from the moment they were born? Or was it a tragic combination of human choices? The fiery pride of Tybalt, the blinding impulsiveness of Romeo, the utter desperation of Juliet, and the well-intentioned but disastrous plans of the friar. Did they seal their fate? And that, I think, is the brilliant question Shakespeare leaves us all to answer.